Hi everyone, welcome back to Monster Island. My name is Nick, and I'm trying to watch every single Godzilla movie. Ever. Just about a year ago, I decided to do what any bored college student would do over the summer and watched all 15 original Godzilla movies from the Showa era for the first time. I mainly did this because I was always interested in the Godzilla franchise and wanted to enrich myself, I guess. But then I chose to turn that into a video, which did very well, leading me to continuing the series with the Heisei era movies back in November. And I had a great time with both videos. The Showa era was mostly enjoyable outside of the campier films toward the end, and the Heisei films felt grandiose with their expansive stories and interconnected plotlines. So now that I have another large blank slate of time ahead of me, I swear my life is interesting, I figured it was about time for me to return to the Godzilla universe. So over the next week or so, I'll be watching all 6 Godzilla movies from the Millennium Era and giving my thoughts on each as I go on. While I was excited to watch both of the previous eras, I think I'm even more intrigued by the Millennium Era. From what I've read in both research and from your comments, each of these movies are standalone stories that apparently only refer back to the original 1954 film. So since this era is seemingly a reset for the franchise, I'm excited to see how these films are executed. But before I begin this movie binge, I need to lay down a couple ground rules. I'll only be watching one movie a day for 6 days in a row so I don't lose my mind like I did in the first video. And after watching each film, I'll give some quick initial thoughts and then rank them as I go along. I'll then end the video with a final ranking of all the films and then give my thoughts on the era as a whole. I should also note that TriStar Pictures released their own Godzilla movie in 1998 before the rest of these films released. I'm not going to cover that film in this video as I want to stick to the Toho releases in Japan, but I do plan on making another video in the future where I cover all the American Godzilla films. And even though I won't be going super in depth with each film, I will be talking about their stories and how they all progress, so spoilers ahead, I guess. So now, without any further ado, let's begin my deep dive into Godzilla's Millennium Era. Up first we have Godzilla 2000, which of course released in the eponymous year of 1999. I was hoping this era would start with another great film like the Heisei era did, but Godzilla 2000 is just kind of alright in my eyes. It portrays Godzilla in a similar way to most of the Heisei films, but the plot here is just kind of a mess. The film follows Shinoda, his daughter Io, and a photographer named Yuki as they follow Godzilla around Japan as he destroys various power sources. It also follows the Crisis Control Intelligence led by Katagiri as they find a UFO in the sea. Once they bring it to the surface and it gets hit by daylight, it begins to attack Godzilla before they blast each other away. They eventually learn that the aliens are trying to gather information on both humans and Godzilla to take over the planet for themselves. Godzilla and the UFO begin fighting each other again before the UFO spawns another monster called Orga. The two of them now fight, and after Orga tries to swallow Godzilla after he walks straight into his mouth, Godzilla kills Orga before also killing Katagiri. I do think the idea of this film is interesting, even though it's the millionth alien invasion story in the series, but the story here felt like they forced several different plotlines into one. It was a little hard to keep up with every single aspect of the story up until the final battle began. The human characters also failed to stand out all that much, aside from Io and her savagery. And it was also nice to see Shinoda and Miyazaki bond over the research, even if it felt crammed into the story. And I know it's a bit of an oxymoron to complain about special effects in a Godzilla movie, but my God, the CGI was atrocious here. The fight scene during the day was really messy with some very obvious green screening, and the UFO in general stood out in the worst way possible. Overall though, Godzilla 2000 is a mostly decent film despite its flaws, but it's still far from the strong start I was hoping this era would have. Obviously top of the list so far, but I do hope it does get topped pretty quickly. Up next we have Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, which I totally didn't have any trouble pronouncing right before this. Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. Probably should have looked it up beforehand. Megaguirus. Jesus Christ, Nick. Anyway, this movie easily has the most convoluted setup of any Godzilla movie so far, which is saying something. After several attacks from Godzilla, Japan bans both nuclear and plasma energy, but are still trying to find a way to destroy him. The G-Graspers, led by Tsuji Mori, build a black hole gun to suck Godzilla into it, and after they test it, a wormhole opens with a prehistoric dragonfly flying through and laying an egg. A kid then discovers it, and after dropping it into the sewer, Because what the hell else are you supposed to do with a giant egg? It hatches into millions of these dragonflies called Meganuas. The Meganuas then attack Godzilla and steal some of his energy before giving it to their queen, who turns into Megaguirus. Godzilla and Megaguirus then fight, and after Godzilla does a Dex Dog detective jump and then gets hurt by an attack 20 seconds after getting hit, he kills Megaguirus by biting its stinger and blasting it with a fireball. The G-Graspers then hit Godzilla with a black hole gun, but once the dust settles, he reawakens in the post-credits. So yeah, this was kind of a clusterfuck of a story here, but for all that happens in this movie, it's still pretty boring. I like the idea of a swarm of creatures going against Godzilla, kind of like in Destroya, but Megaguirus and the Meganuas felt really ineffective against him. Godzilla killed most of the Meganuas on his own, and when Megaguirus came into play, the fight felt relatively short for a Godzilla movie. Also, none of the human characters stood out to me at all, and while I know this era isn't conjoined story-wise, this movie felt like a slap in the face to what the last movie stood for. I don't think this movie is terrible by any means, but it really failed to impress me and is probably the weakest Godzilla movie after the Showa era. This movie goes below Godzilla 2000, and I'm hoping this next movie picks things up again. Next we have Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. Giant monsters all out attack. Dear lord, what a title. Out of all the Millennium Era movies, I was most excited to watch this one because of the level of hype surrounding it from the Godzilla fanbase. This movie seemed to redefine what a Godzilla movie could be for a lot of people, and I can absolutely see why. The film follows Yuri, a reporter for BS Digital Media, subtle, alongside Takeda, her colleague, and Tachibana, her father and the commander of the military. Earthquakes and deaths are occurring all around Japan, which are caused by Baragon, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. These three are casted as the guardians of Japan, who awaken once Godzilla reappears. And my god, Godzilla is just an evil motherfucker in this movie. He not only feels 10 times more menacing with his pure white eyes, but he also feels a lot more reckless here. He literally destroys a children's hospital in his first scene. Anyway, Baragon is the first to fight Godzilla, who eventually dies after getting nuked by him. And once Godzilla enters Tokyo, Mothra and King Ghidorah arrive to fight back. Mothra eventually dies as well, leading to Ghidorah getting strength from both her and Baragon. He then wounds Godzilla, and once they go to fight underwater, Tachibana goes in via submarine to attack Godzilla's wound. Ghidorah eventually dies, and the submarine gets swallowed by Godzilla, but Tachibana is able to attack Godzilla from the inside and ends up killing him. This film probably has the most radical shift of any Godzilla movie so far, and honestly, I think it was executed beautifully. Godzilla once again felt like the absolute menace he was originally portrayed as, and it was interesting to see Ghidorah portrayed as a hero for once. I also really enjoyed how Yuri and her father grew closer as the film went on, but if I'm being honest, I didn't really care about any of the other human characters here. The first quarter of the movie or so dragged quite a bit as well, and didn't pick up until Godzilla started wreaking havoc. But other than those, I have almost nothing to complain about. This was just a fantastic movie overall. I had a great time watching this film, and it's easily my favorite of the era so far. Top of the list. Up next we have the third installment of confusing MechaGodzilla sequel movie titles, Godzilla Against MechaGodzilla. And like Mecha 2 from the last era, this movie changes the origins for MechaGodzilla. Instead of being made by shape-shifting space monkeys or being an original mech, MechaGodzilla is made from the remains of the original Godzilla from 1954. Dr. Yahura leads the project while also bringing his daughter Sarah with him, while Akane pilots MechaGodzilla, who's renamed to Kiryu in this movie. Kiryu's first defense against Godzilla is mostly successful, but as they're about to freeze him with a weapon called Absolute Zero, the original Godzilla's DNA takes control of the mech and destroys most of the city before running out of power. And as Kiryu is being repaired, we start to see Akane and Sarah bond over their trauma and isolation, which was a really nice dynamic to watch unfold. After Kiryu is fully repaired, it and Godzilla fight in Tokyo again before Godzilla damages Kiryu. Akane then goes into Kiryu to control it manually, and carries Godzilla out to sea and shoots him with the Absolute Zero. Godzilla ends up surviving the attack, but swims away from Japan for the time being. This is the shortest movie of the entire Millennium Era, but they still managed to pack in a pretty good story into it. Kiryu still felt fresh, even though this was its fourth movie in the franchise so far. The human characters were all well written and had interesting stories behind them, and the final fight was one of my favorites of the era so far. I do wish they took the idea of the original Godzilla taking over Kiryu a little further, but I still enjoyed the rest of the story. It's not the most substantive movie of the era, but for what it is, it's a pretty good time. I'll put this just below GMK in the rankings, and I hope these final two movies stay in the same lane of quality. Okay, so I may have lied to you all at the top of this video. While all the other films in this era are standalone films, Tokyo S.O.S actually takes place right after the events of Against Mechagodzilla, and they did a pretty good job building off the standard set in the previous film. While Mecha is being repaired, Mothra and her fairies visit Dr. Chujo, who was in the original Mothra film. They warn him and his nephew Yoshido that if the original Godzilla bones aren't returned to the sea, Mothra will attack Japan. Chujo attempts to get the Prime Minister to scrap Mecha, but after he refuses, Godzilla attacks Tokyo. Mothra is then summoned to fight Godzilla, but as she begins to die, MechaGodzilla is launched. Then 2 Mothra larvae hatch from an egg, like in the first Godzilla and Mothra movie, and head to Japan to help. While I was editing this section, I came across this image. Now you all have to experience it too. Mecha is eventually destroyed by Godzilla, but after Yoshido fixes the mech from the inside, Godzilla attacks again, which traps him inside. The Mothra larvae then wrap Godzilla up, and right as Mecha is about to kill Godzilla for good, the original DNA takes over again and carries Godzilla out to sea. Yoshido is then freed by Mecha before it and Godzilla tumble into the ocean. Okay, so if you're at all familiar with my thoughts on the previous Mothra and MechaGodzilla movies, you probably already know how I feel about this one. I really enjoyed a ton about this movie, which surprised me because of how this movie is generally ranked against the rest of the Millennium Era. To me, this felt like a modern remake of Mothra vs. Godzilla while also integrating the previous film's story. I also enjoyed most of the human characters in this movie, especially Yoshido and his conflicted relationship with MechaGodzilla. And the entire battle sequence, which takes up about half of the film, is honestly one of my favorite Godzilla fights of the entire franchise so far. So yeah, like the previous 2 eras, a MechaGodzilla film has surprised me by how much I enjoyed it. I am a little biased since Mothra has become my favorite kaiju in the Godzilla universe, but aside from that, I still think this is a great movie. I'll put this right above the previous film in the rankings for now. Alright, we are now down to the final movie in this era. It sure has been nice that these recent eras haven't had 15 movies in them. And knowing the reputation surrounding this next film, tomorrow's gonna be an interesting day.
All I can tell y'all is that it's about to go down.
Alright, so I watched Godzilla Final Wars the other day, and it was so bad insane that I had to watch it again, and this time I watched it with a returning anime protagonist to this channel, Mr. Tai of TheRatFactory.
Hello.
We watched Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah when we watched the Heisei era movies, and what do you think of Final Wars?
Holy shit. That's the best way I can describe it. Let's start off with the opening scene. I think you and I both said it. Is that Stalin? It's American dude with the most Stalin-like mustache in a Russian-like military uniform.
So the movie focuses on a squad of mutants called the M Squad. How fitting. And the main character is Ozaki, who's a mutant, and then they also have Miyuki, who's a UN biologist. The movie really kickstarts once basically every single monster from the Showa era, like Gigan, Rodan, Anguirus, start attacking basically every single city.
It was a monster mash.
Yeah, it was a monster mash.
These aliens come down. The Exilians are like, we've come to be friends with you. We've come to help you.
The main characters start to realize that they've replaced certain people, like the UN representative, and then after they completely destroy the Exilians' plans, the controller kills the leader of the Exilians, and then takes over and becomes even more evil, I guess.
All the the mutants come in, and he does this like weird hand gesture. I think he does this or something, and they all start having an attack. Besides like the main character,
Ozaki and Kazama, they have a motorcycle fight. And while all of this is happening, there's a subplot with a grandpa, his kid, and fucking Manila. I don't know why they brought him back when they had a perfectly good baby Godzilla.
It's just a complete right hook, because there's no build-up, there's nothing. It's just the fucking grandpa holding his gun up like, what are you? You ain't a normal person.
The main characters decide halfway through the film that they need Godzilla to destroy the Exilians, and then they go to Antarctica to free him, and then Godzilla just goes on a killing spree with all the other monsters, one of which had a Sum 41 song in the background.
Godzilla's like putting the burns on these like kids and just hustling straight towards them.
Godzilla starts fighting a very neutered version of King Ghidorah, and then once Gigan comes back from being decapitated earlier in the film. Mothra arrives to help him out. The main characters break into the Exilian spaceship. Ozaki and the controller find out they're brothers because they're Kaisers or something like that. Then Ozaki and the controller have another Matrix fight, which Ozaki wins. And then once the controller and the Exilian spaceship explode, King Ghidorah actually turns into King Ghidorah, like we actually know him as, and then starts beating the shit out of Godzilla. And then Ozaki gives his Kaiser power to Godzilla, and then he beats the shit out of Ghidorah, and then that's the end of the monster stuff, pretty much.
Godzilla was somehow a side character in his own movie.
This entire movie felt like a combination between The Matrix, Avengers Endgame, and like every single Godzilla movie up to this point mixed into one somehow. And I gotta say, for as freaking weird as this movie is, it's kind of charming in a lot of ways.
It's 2 hours I will never get back, but those are 2 hours that I'm happy to give up.
The rest of this era is like fairly standard Godzilla stuff, you know, updated to the modern times. And then all of a sudden this movie is just Matrix Light with the piss filter and everything.
If you have friends and you want to have a good 2 hours, watch it with a group of friends. Because we were sitting here just laughing and pointing some of the most random shit out to each other.
This isn't going to rank super high in terms of my other ratings with the Millennium Era movies. Even though this isn't ranking high, I highly f***ing recommend watching this movie because it stands out in such an interesting way that you can't not watch this movie, I guess. So I guess for now, I would place this just below Godzilla 2000 in the rankings.
I give it 4 cheeses out of 5. I think it was great. It was just a blast.
Alright, so now since I've watched all of the Millennium Era movies, I'm going to take a couple days to, number one, rest, but also gather my final thoughts about the era as a whole and then give you my final rankings. So I'll be back in a couple days.
One eternity later.
Alright, it's now been just under a week since I finished watching all the Godzilla Millennium Era movies, and now I have my final rankings for them all. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and count them down. Starting at number 6 is Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. Then at number 5 is Godzilla 2000 Millennium. At number 4 is Godzilla Final Wars. And at number 3 is Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. And to round out the list, number 2 is Godzilla Tokyo S.O.S. And at number 1, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. Giant monsters all out attack. So yeah, my final rankings didn't change all that much, aside from moving Final Wars up one spot. While Final Wars is far from my favorite Godzilla movie, I found it way more memorable than 2000 or Megaguirus. It's definitely the most absurd and distinct Godzilla movie so far. Whether that's a good thing or not is really up to you, of course, but in my case, I had a pretty fun time with it. And as for the rest of the era, I think it's pretty decent. It may not have as many great movies as the Heisei or even the Showa era, but I still appreciated the approach it took. Taking the anthology route was a great way to shake up the franchise, and movies like GMK and the MechaGodzilla movies really benefited from it. I do think the Millennium Era is the weakest era so far. Sorry, Tony. But like the Heisei era, I don't think any of these movies are bad. Megaguirus may have been a clear least favorite for me, but I found it more uninteresting than bad. And if you want to see me rank these movies against all the previous Godzilla movies, you're gonna have to wait a while. I haven't watched most of those movies since I made those 2 videos, and I'd also like to finish the remaining movies before I rank them all. Next time I come back to the Godzilla series, I'll be taking a break from the Toho films and instead talk about all the American Godzilla movies. But for the time being, I hope you all enjoyed hearing my thoughts on these movies, and let me know how you'd rank them in the comments. And keep in mind, these are just my own personal opinions, so please don't burn me at the stake for placing Tokyo S.O.S so high. So, thank you all for watching, and I wish you all the best. Take care.
Run! It's Godzilla!
It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
Still, we should run like it is Godzilla!
Though it isn't.